Sam Bankman-Fried is back in the United States, and he'll be facing serious criminal charges that could mean life in prison. He has been granted bail of $250 million, which is one of the highest bails in U.S. history. The case gets even more interesting because his accomplices, Gary Wang and Caroline Ellison, who headed Alameda, are both pleading guilty. This already boxes Sam in and makes it difficult for him to escape conviction. If you are new to the channel, subscribe to keep yourself updated. Now, let's get to the experts to talk about the matter.
The biggest news, I guess, well, other than he's arrived in the U.S. and he didn't fight for extradition, is that his former friends, I would guess, and former business associates have flipped, and they're going to cooperate with U.S. authorities, which is a big deal, clearly. And this is Caroline Ellison, who was a former CEO of Alameda Research, Sam Bankman-Fried's hedge fund, and Gary Wang, also a co-founder of Alameda, but most recently he was CTO of FTX. And so this is a big deal because obviously they will get reduced sentences, or the prosecutors will recommend reduced sentences if they cooperate. But it also means this adds pressure for SBF. They've obviously they've pled guilty, and we obviously don't know exactly what they're going to say. But they've also been accused by the SEC and the CFTC, who've amended their previous FTX suits, and they've been accused of cooperating with SBF, and essentially in the case of Gary Wang, he's accused of creating sort of lines of code that would have allowed Alameda to get unlimited credit on FTX. And they're part of sort of the biggest charge here for everyone is that they were essentially using customer funds to trade and to cover up Alameda's bad debts.
Caroline Ellison is a graduate of Stanford University with a bachelor's degree in mathematics. With such a background, one would believe that she had a lot to offer a company like Alameda Research, where she was CEO and was in charge of managing the investments of stakeholders. Instead, Caroline somehow squandered a reported $10 billion. The exact figures are yet to be verified, but at the time of the FTX crash, Sam blamed Caroline for the crash of his companies, FTX and Alameda Research. In an interview with Vox News, he implied that Caroline, who is his ex-girlfriend, was responsible for the missing funds. This tallies with other claims that funds were moved from FTX to Alameda, and this happened with the help of Sam's second-in-command, Gary Wang. The big question is, who is Gary Wang? The co-founder of FTX and Alameda Research is such an extremely secretive person that even the media knows next to nothing about him. He had worked at Google before he started the cryptocurrency companies with Sam, his friend from a high school camp. Wang is the brain behind the codes that were used to steal funds. He will be a crucial witness in this case, and there will be a lot to learn from this secretive programmer. Fortunately, both Caroline Ellison and Gary Wang have both flipped and decided to plead guilty. They are now working with the feds to expose the whole scheme. By cooperating, they are likely to get lesser sentences, so it's highly likely they will throw Sam under the bus. There are speculations that even Sam's parents could be involved. A former U.S. prosecutor in the Watergate case, Nick Ackerman, speaks to Yahoo Finance about this. Let's go over and listen to him.
I think they are the primary witnesses that led to the indictment here of Bankman-Fried. I mean, they are both insiders. Ellison was the person that was handling the customer money at FTX, and Wang was the person who created the program that allowed them to move money around illegally. So you've got people who are actually living with Bankman-Fried in the Bahamas. They started the company with him, basically, and they really know where all the bodies are buried. They know who's involved. They know who did what, and really are in a position to name names of others who might be involved. And it wouldn't surprise me, and we talked, I think, on the show the last time, about whether or not Bankman-Fried's parents might be criminally liable. And certainly they would be in a position to know that, as well as other people who were in the company that might be criminally involved.
There are early indications this case is likely to involve many more people, and many of them could be prominent personalities. Besides politicians and top business executives, Sam's parents could be indicted. Ironically, Joseph Bankman, his father, and Barbara Fried, his mother, are both law professors who should have known better. They were critical in the founding of the companies and also big beneficiaries of the slush that followed when the companies were operational. Let's go back to Nick Ackerman to learn more.
In support of his freedom, his own attorneys They highlighted that Bankman-Fried voluntarily left the Bahamas, waived his right to fight extradition to the United States. They said that should go in his favor. Also, they said, interestingly, at home that he could get exercise as well as mental health and substance abuse treatment. So it'll be interesting to see if he does enter a not guilty plea, if that will come into his defense. Now, this is all, of course, on the heels of an announcement late last night from the Southern District of New York. Federal prosecutors say that two of Bankman-Fried's former deputies, Caroline Ellison and also Gary Wang, had entered guilty pleas on multiple criminal charges and also flipped as witnesses for the prosecution. Those two executives are charged with similar counts to Bankman-Fried, wire fraud, conspiracy, among other charges.
Nick Ackerman was right about Sam's moving to the United States because he is likely to be treated better and also have the opportunity to get a bail. It doesn't stop there, though. SBF is also likely to get a lighter sentence because of his voluntary extradition. Who else is better to comment on this case but the lawyer that represented Bernie Madoff? Ira Lee Sorkin was Bernie Madoff's lawyer and speaks about the possible plans that SBF has.
Well, what stands out most is that many of the charges are conspiracies. You can't have a conspiracy with yourself. You have a conspiracy of at least two people. And what I suspect is going to happen is there will be what we call a superseding indictment, where there will be other defendants charged who conspired with the main defendant here, and there'll be additional charges. But the fact that there are numerous conspiracies leads me to believe that this investigation is far from being over. It could be that the timing was, and I'm speculating, totally speculating, there was some discussion perhaps that he was secreting money around the world in different countries, that he was going to skip to another country that didn't have a strong extradition treaty with the United States, and the government moved in as quickly as possible to prevent that from happening. That's pure speculation. I don't know. But it's not the first time that the government has moved quickly when when that evidence is out there and they're concerned about what the defendant is going to do.
In the wake of FTX's bankruptcy, Sam Bankman-Fried transferred $100 million to supposed investors in the Bahamas. Was this a ploy to hide some money with these accounts? Sorkin says there were speculations that he was moving money around the world and was a flight risk. It's no wonder the Bahamian government did not grant him bail. So, does Sam still have a cache of this money, or is he truly broke, as he has been claiming?
So you expect more indictments here to come, more co-conspirators here. I mean, he's now being accused of conspiracy to commit wire fraud on customers and lenders, money laundering, violations of campaign finance laws. There are 8 criminal charges here. What is he looking at if convicted?
We won't be around if he gets the maximum. Let me put it that way. And you're much younger than I am. It is not likely that defendants get the maximum sentence. But the mail fraud, the wire fraud, the conspiracies, the maximum is 20 years. And judges, of course, in sentencing are going to factor a lot of things in, none of which we know about at this time. But he's facing many, many, many years in prison.
Sorkin believes that SBF will go to jail, but he thinks it would be just for a few years, 21 years being the maximum. Ari Redboard of TRM Labs talks to CNBC on what the legal implications could be. TRM Labs is a blockchain intelligence company that helps financial institutions, crypto businesses, and government agencies detect frauds that take place on the blockchain, so they are familiar with cryptocurrency-related crimes like that of SBF. He does not agree that Sam will only face a few years in prison. Now, let's listen to Ari Redboard.
I mean, he's coming back to the U.S. It seems he's hoping to get bail, which would perhaps a little bit optimistic on his front. But, you know, how serious are the charges against him? What's likely to be the process here, and how long will it take?
The charges are very, very serious, and there are essentially many counts, 8 counts of different sorts of fraud. And I can tell you, sort of, judges here in the U.S. look to something called the federal sentencing guidelines, and they're not mandatory, but they provide a guideline range for judges. And on sort of a very quick look at those guidelines, the guideline range, I mean, he's looking potentially at life in prison here. An initial hearing, it's almost pro forma, you'll plead not guilty. But then really where this becomes interesting over the next few weeks and months, does he try to cooperate? Is he really serious about making users whole? Because that'll be a big part of the government's case here. They will want to go out and do everything they can to find those funds to ensure that the victims are made whole. So he could potentially cooperate. He could potentially provide assistance to the government. He could potentially plead guilty, which would inevitably get that guideline range down, which will really be important for him here.
Sam is potentially going to face life in prison like Bernie Madoff. He will likely plead not guilty. The focus of the court will be recovering as much money from SBF as possible, and the amount he is able to refund victims may determine his sentencing, amongst other things he provides in closing the case. Subscribe to the channel to follow up on developments. Adios, and thanks for watching.